Welcome into Texans Today, everybody. I'm your host, Jeremy Chuggs, and on today's show, a lot of rumors have been flying around on social media. Could the Texans add this guy? Could the Texans look to do this to save the season? I'll look at some of those possible additions, and I'm going to tell you how likely I think the Texans are to make those moves, or even if those moves are possible to make for this Texans team. Now, the reason why we're talking about additions going into Week 4, the Texans are in the basement of the AFC South with the Tennessee Titans. Surprise, surprise, the Indianapolis Colts are 3-0 with Daniel Jones to start the year. I told y'all, if they started Daniel Jones, it would be a much better team than if they played with Anthony Richardson. We've seen how that's gone so far through 3 weeks. The Jaguars, obviously 2-1 after beating the Texans in Week 3. So changes need to be made, things need to be done, and that needs to happen ASAP. Before I get into all these rumors, though, be real with me for a second. Are there any moves the Texans can make to save this season? Do you think it's all said and done? Should they pack up their bags already? Or do you still have a small semblance of hope? Let me know down in the comments section. Give me a yes, give me a no. Are there any moves the Texans can make to save this season? Here are the possible additions this season that I've seen all across the internet, around people DMing me, on social media, this, that, and the other. Could the Texans trade for an offensive lineman from the Las Vegas Raiders? Could the Texans maybe convince an offensive lineman to unretire? And could the Texans add a familiar offensive coach? I'll break down all these three on today's show, but this is how we break it down here at Texans Today. This is my Toro heads meter. So if I give something 0 heads or fake news, obviously not happening. 1 Toro head, small shred of truth. 2 Toro heads, people are talking. Think of it, as a, semi-likely thing to happen. 3 Toro heads, I think it's pretty likely. And 4 Toro heads, it's happening. H-Town, hold it down. So let's talk about the first possible addition that the Texans could make. Could they trade for a Raiders offensive lineman? I'm actually giving this one pretty likely. 2 Toro heads. I think there's a good chance that the Texans could call up the Las Vegas Raiders and with their draft capital, make something happen for Jackson Powers Johnson. The Raiders' second-year offensive lineman. He was drafted last year in round 2 out of Oregon. He played really well at center for them, but they just keep on trying to move him to guard, which not too bad, but the problem is now they're not even playing him at guard. 0 snaps in Week 3. The only snaps he got in Week 3, that loss to the Commanders, was on field goals. Even though he was active, even though he was good to go, did not play him on the starting offensive line. And that's big trouble for a second-year man who was a second-round pick for this Las Vegas Raiders team. Last year, in 2024, his PFF grades, 2024-2025, his PFF grades overall 63.9, run blocking grade of 70.4, pass blocking grade of 68.3, and only 2 sacks allowed last year for the Las Vegas Raiders. Not too bad for a rookie. And even though he's not playing for the Raiders, even though he had decent numbers last year, the Texans they need all the talent they can get. Like, look at this Texans offensive line right now. Nothing to write home to mama about. Ariante Urstray, I still believe him as possibly the left tackle of the future, but he has a lot of work to get done. Titus Howard, maybe the lone bright spot on this Texans offensive line. I thought he's played pretty well so far, and the interior, just not good. Not good so far for this Texans team. Jake Andrews, Laken Tomlinson, Ed Ingram, all playing very meh, if you ask me. Here's the trade idea that I came up with, and I ran it past our Raiders Report host, Mitchell Renz. He said he thinks this might be able to get it done. The Texans trade Dylan Horton, defensive end, because the Raiders need D-line help. Texans, maybe the good part about this squad, we have a lot of good defensive linemen that could be up for a trade. So I'm sending them Dylan Horton and a 2026 4th-round pick. We have 2 4th-round picks in this year's draft, so why not get rid of one of them if that means we can get a good offensive lineman in return? Let me know, though. Who do you think wins this trade? If you think it's the Texans, type HOU. If you think it's the Las Vegas Raiders, type LV. Let me know down in the comment section, who do you think wins this trade? Now, next up, for possible additions. We talked a trade for an offensive lineman. Now let's look at free agency, and in particular, maybe somebody who could unretire and come help this Texans team. I'll tell you how likely that is here in just a moment, but couldn't do today's show if it wasn't for our amazing sponsor out there, Prize Picks. Daily fantasy sports made easy, and it makes watching any sport that much more exciting and fun. Football, basketball, baseball, hockey, any sport you're watching, this turns up the intensity to 10 and makes it that much more fun to watch with our friends over at Prize Picks. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement this season on Prize Picks, where it's good to be right. Prize Picks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. Prize Picks offers Venmo, Apple Pay, MasterCard, and more for quick and easy deposits into your account this football season. And for this weekend, a great deal on tap for you. Jalen Hurts, all he needs to do, 1 passing yard. I know there's all the jokes out there. Jalen Hurts can't pass the football. I think he can get 1 yard. I think he can. So give me that, and I'm going to pair it with this lineup right here. C.J. Stroud, 16.5 rushing yards. Give me the more on that. He's used his feet a lot better this season. And then Tony Pollard, 64.5 rush yards. The Texans defense has looked great against the run in week 3. Week 2, not so good, but we're not going to talk about that. Let's look forward, and hopefully we can keep Tony Pollard to less than 64.5 rush yards. You can use my lineup, or just go ahead and make your own with our friends over at Prize Picks. It's the best way to win cash while watching sports. Join millions of users and sign up today. Download the Prize Picks app. Use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. Now, could the Texans convince an offensive lineman to unretire? I don't think so. I'm giving this one a fake news. I've seen everybody out there saying, Chuggs, what about Brandon Scherff? Could the Texans convince Brandon Scherff? He had 17 games played, 0 sacks allowed last year. Why not? Why wouldn't he return? Well, I think there's multiple reasons why the Texans wouldn't want to have Brandon Scherff come back. First off, I don't think Brandon Scherff wants to play for the Texans. This was him last year getting into a massive brawl with Azeez Al-Shire where both of them ripped their helmets off and were ready to go at each other. And I know they're grown men that can, if enough money was involved, maybe could put their differences aside. But one, the Texans don't have a lot of money to pay him. And then two, why would you unretire to go to a team that's 0-3? I think the only way Brandon Scherff would unretire is if there was a team that had Super Bowl aspirations that was playing up to that level that he could step in and play for. That's the only thing. And then two, offensive linemen, I don't know if it's just me, every offensive lineman that retires ends up losing like 200 pounds. Look at Joe Thomas. He looks like a completely different person because these offensive linemen, to keep that weight up, it's a job in and itself to weigh that much. They are eating a shit ton of food. They are putting so many calories down to make sure they're in the 300s throughout the season, that they keep their weight up, that they have that mass. As soon as they're done playing football, they're like, I don't need to weigh this much. I'm going to lose all that weight. And we see it time in and time out. Joe Thomas, you see it with Taylor Lewan with Bustin' with the Boys. He looks like a completely different person. He's weighs probably like 230 right now, 240. So I have no idea what shape Brandon Scherff is in. And even beyond that, like I said before, I don't think he wants to play for the Houston Texans. So I'm giving that one fake news. Lastly, could the Texans add a familiar offensive coach before the season's done? I'm only going to give this one Toro head, and I would give it more, but it's just not up to the Texans. It's really not up to the Texans whether or not they're able to add a familiar offensive coach. The two names that I've heard floated around to possibly join the staff, Mike McDaniel, who's the current head coach of the Miami Dolphins. So obviously something has to happen there before you're able to add him onto your staff. And then Gary Kubiak, the former Texans head coach. Each of them comes with their own complications. First up, as I mentioned, Mike McDaniel, he has a job right now. He's the head coach of the Miami Dolphins. And I hope and I know that he very much wants to keep that job as a head coach. So as long as the Dolphins keep him on staff, as long as he has a job there in Miami, you're not going to be able to get him. Now, If the Dolphins continue to lose and they end up letting go of Mike McDaniel, that's a different discussion. That's where the one Toro head comes in, because the ties to Houston run deep with Mike McDaniel. He was the OC for the 49ers, while DeMeco Ryans was the DC at the same time. They're good friends. They're good buddies. They had a joint practice in the offseason where they were all chummy, talking it up to each other. There's a good rapport between Mike McDaniel and DeMeco Ryans. So if he was let go by the Miami Dolphins, I think that would be a logical fit for him to come over to the Houston Texans. And then, yeah, look at this old photo of Mike McDaniel. He was once a former offensive assistant or, assistant coach for this Texans squad way back in the day. So the ties run deep. He's been with this Texans organization before. He's been with DeMeco Ryans. We know how much this team values connections. So the connections make sense for Mike McDaniel if something happens in Miami, a big if, for him to possibly come to the Houston Texans. Now, let's look at Gary Kubiak, who is the former head coach of the Houston Texans, also won a Super Bowl with the Denver Broncos, and was the head coach while DeMeco Ryans was a member of the Houston Texans. So obviously that runs deep there. The only problem with him, he's also retired. Now, he's not completely out of, coaching football. I know he does some stuff overseas with European football, helping out, being a consultant over there. He's also, I believe, a head coach of like the Polynesian Bowl, something like that. So, he still has his hands in on coaching. And if he was to join staff, it would be as a, tertiary role, a, offensive consultant of some point. Probably the same with Mike McDaniel if he's joining the team mid-season. Both these guys, not very likely, though. I don't know if Gary Kubiak is going to come over and, come try to save the Texans offense. I don't know if that's the case. I'll have to maybe talk to my stepdad and see if his cousin's able to come over. Maybe I should have done that before I started filming this video. But I think both of these are semi-unlikely. It just really depends more on Mike McDaniel, what the Dolphins do with him throughout this season. That's all I have for you on today's show, folks. If you want to hit me up on Twitter, you can do so at Jeremy Chuggs. My DMs are open. And if you made it to the end of today's video, you're an absolute real one. Spam those H's down below and make sure you hit that subscribe button for daily Texans content all season long.